what if I told you that the key to getting our kids ready for a future we can't even predict was actually figured out over 100 years ago? Well, that's what we're diving into today. We're going to explore the Montessori philosophy, an educational model that honestly might be more relevant right now than it has ever been.
All right, so before we get into the nuts and bolts of Montessori, let's just take a step back and think about early learning itself. We really have to ask ourselves a pretty big question. Are the school systems we've all kind of inherited actually preparing our kids for the world they're going to live in? Not the one we grew up in, but theirs.
I mean, that's really the core of it, isn't it? Think about it. Our world is just constantly changing. Technology, jobs, everything is in flux. So, with all that going on, why are so many of our schools still running on a playbook that was basically designed for the Industrial Revolution? You have to wonder, is this whole system getting kids ready for the past or for the future? And you can see that clash right here. On one side, you've got the skills for yesterday. Things like compliance, just following orders, rote memorization, stuff that was perfect for a factory line world. But on the other side, that's what's needed for tomorrow. We're talking adaptability, critical thinking, real creativity. There's a huge gap between these two lists, and that's the problem we've got to figure out how to solve. So the big question is, how do we bridge that gap? Well, it turns out one really powerful answer might be found in the Montessori philosophy. It's an approach that, in a lot of ways, feels like it was custom built from the ground up to develop exactly those skills that we just talked about, those skills for tomorrow. Okay, so at its absolute heart, Montessori is what you'd call a child-centered approach. And I know that can sound like just another buzzword, right? But it's not. What it really means is that the entire system, the whole shebang, is designed around how a child naturally develops. It's based on actual scientific observations by its founder, Dr. Maria Montessori. It's all about nurturing the whole person, their social, emotional, and physical side, not just stuffing their brain with facts. And this quote from Maria Montessori herself it perfectly captures how radical this idea is. She said, "The greatest sign of a teacher's success is being able to say, 'The children are now working as if I did not exist.'" I mean, think about that. True success isn't a teacher standing at the front controlling everything. It's creating an environment where the kids are so engaged, so into what they're doing, that they don't even need you. It's all about giving them complete ownership of their own learning. Okay, so that all sounds amazing in theory, right? But what does it actually look like when you walk into a classroom? Let's go inside and see how all these ideas come together to create a learning space that's, well, it's totally different. So it all really boils down to three core pieces that all work together. First, you have what's called child-directed work. That work happens in a very special place, the prepared environment. And overseeing it all, you have the teacher as a guide. So let's break down what each of those really means. Okay, so first up is child-directed work. And this is a huge shift. So instead of a teacher standing up and telling 25 kids to open their books to the exact same page, in a Montessori classroom, a child actually chooses their own activity, their own work. And by getting to follow what they're naturally curious about, they develop this incredible ability to concentrate. And maybe most importantly, they build up that internal fire to learn, what we call intrinsic motivation. Now, this self-direction doesn't just happen in a vacuum. It's not a free-for-all. It happens within what's called the prepared environment. And this is key. Literally every single thing in the room, from the tiny child-sized chairs and tables to the specific learning materials laid out on low, accessible shelves, it's all there on purpose. The whole point is to empower the child to explore and to do things for themselves without having to ask an adult for help all the time. And finally, that brings us to the teacher. Their role is completely transformed. They're not a lecturer at the front of the room. They're more of a quiet observer, a guide on the side. And this kind of subtle guidance is so, so powerful. Because the teacher isn't jumping in and micromanaging, the child gets the space to develop really critical skills on their own. We're talking about planning, focus, self-control, all that important stuff. Okay, so we've got these really unique classroom principles. But what does it all add up to? What's the end result? Well, this is where it all comes full circle. We're going to connect this right back to those skills we mentioned at the very beginning. The ones our kids are absolutely going to need. So what kind of skills does this all lead to? Well, it's no accident. It's a direct result of the system. That child-directed work, that builds independence and that intrinsic motivation we talked about. The prepared environment, it sparks creativity and critical thinking. And because they're often working in mixed-age groups, they learn collaboration and social responsibility. See? These skills are literally baked into the DNA of the classroom. And let's be really clear here. This isn't just about getting good grades or acing a test. This goes so much deeper. We're talking about fundamental life skills. What this method builds is a foundation for someone who's adaptable, who's curious, and who actually loves to learn, not just while they're in school, but for their entire life. All right, so this all brings us to one last thought to chew on. As we're all looking ahead into a future that's, well, pretty much full of unknowns, these Montessori principles really offer us a powerful new way to think about what education could and should be.
So I'll leave you with this question to mull over. How can we start to reimagine education so it's not just about preparing kids for some predictable future, but instead it's about unlocking the unique potential inside every single child so they can create a future that we can't even begin to imagine yet? That's the challenge, for sure, but it's also the incredible promise packed into these ideas. Thanks so much for joining me.